Now, I got the pleasure of introducing Vicky, and I thought, right, let's see, obviously intelligent, clearly skilled, experienced speaker, delightful in person. And I thought, right, is this the picture or a Tinder profile? I'm writing the wrong thing. So I thought about another thing. So we're in an era of community managers, and it's become now a job title. And it seems to me a lot of the time it's a job title to satisfy a company's need to either be a part of something they don't understand, to control something, to create a community without actually understanding what a community actually is. They see this misdirected panic about social phenomena and social media and think we must be a part of that because our software was built on communities. Vicky's a community manager, and she's a community manager because she cares about communities and about the people inside the communities and the companies and how they engage with them. Vicky.
Hi. Going to start my timer. You'll be happy to hear I am not going to go until 10:30, so that would be great. But we will have time for Q&A at the end. So hello, welcome to the keynote and our fine moonlighting. As Mark said, I am VM Brasseur, but because we're all friends here, you can call me Vicky. Plus the virtual machine jokes have gotten really old. Please do not think yours is original. It is not. Don't try it. Here's my contact information. First we have my Twitter. I do tweet a lot, and I appreciate being tweeted at, which is why my Twitter handle is also at the bottom of every slide. Next we have my Freenode IRC nick. I don't exist in the real world. I only exist on IRC. And then we have my email address if you would like to do something a little longer form, and I encourage you to use all of these. So while Mark described me as a community manager, that is true, but what I actually do most of the time is lead software engineering departments. So I am a techie sort of geek sort of person, but aside from that, among other things, part of how I spend my time is as an author and community moderator for opensource.com. All things open all the time, so please visit us. 1 million readers a month can't be wrong. If you would like to write for us, please come see me. So yeah, that's my little pitch, the only pitch you're going to get the entire keynote. Go to opensource.com, we're great. So, I am Vicky Brasseur, and I love free and open source software. Now, you probably do too, or else you wouldn't be here today. But what is it we love, really? I mean, free and open source software has been around for nearly 40 years now, almost as long as I have. In 1986, Stallman founded the FSF to help support the 4 freedoms, and these are those freedoms. The freedom to run the program however you want, to study and change the program, to distribute it, and to redistribute your modified program however you want. Many people I know live their lives in pursuit and protection of these 4 freedoms. I call this entire period of the 4 freedoms, it's FLOSS 1.0, right? This is the initial version of the movement. This is where it started. This is where everything began. In 1998, the term open source was brought into common usage and codified by the open source definition. 98, that's when we started talking about open source software. It's really not that long ago. So the definition, the open source definition, it expands upon the concepts set forth by the 4 freedoms. It includes a lot more criteria, however, to determine what is open source. And many of those criteria are involved with licensing and making sure that the software remains open and available to all. Now, the definition is maintained by the Open Source Initiative. It provides focus and direction to many of us, including myself. What follows the open source definition is what I call open source 2.0. It evolved and it continues right on evolving, and it gains more mind share and more users every single day, and that's really magnificent. But what we all know is that while the 4 freedoms and the open software definition are very much concerned with the code, with the software, open source is more than code. It's a philosophy. Free and open source software is a philosophy of sharing. As long as there has been software, we have shared software, even before Stallman. But when Stallman created the 4 freedoms, he codified a belief that sharing is a fundamental and an ethical priority in software development. This sharing is about believing that giants exist and that we stand on their shoulders, and that one day we will be those giants and we will raise up those who come after us. But it's more than simply sharing, right? Putting your code out there is one thing, but it doesn't evolve all on its own. So free and open source is also about collaboration, about working with others to make the improvements needed to create the tools that we need, both today and in the future. Free and open source is about coming together to make something bigger and better than we could make alone. Which means, of course, that free and open source software is all about the people. People doing things alongside people to help other people. That is free and open source. Without the people, there would be no need for the software. Without the efforts of those people, there would be no software. So therefore, people are the core of free and open source software. This is the motto of the Humane Development Movement, and you can visit them here at humanedevelopment.org. We are humans working with humans to develop software for the benefit of humans. Now, while the Humane Development Movement is not specifically about free and open source software, I feel that the motto perfectly captures the spirit of what it is we do. Open source has come to stand for so much more than it was originally intended. Community and collaboration and coming together to build and to support resources which improve lives in ways both large and small, and which empower and enable others to do the exact same thing. And then there is this powerful, tiny little word, open. So while free and open source is all about really the source, it is underpinned by this concept of openness and honesty and sharing. Openness transcends code. This is not a new concept, of course. As I mentioned, we've been sharing software as long as we have been writing software. And of course, sharing itself is older than civilization. We see animals sharing. It's a fundamental concept to so many different groups. But with the coming of the free and open source movement, the concept of openness has been recognized, codified, evangelized, and embraced in so many ways beyond simply source code. There is open data, which allows information to be used by everyone. You have map data and weather data and data about trees and resource management and expenditures. Cities, states, countries, researchers, they are all making data publicly available for use and reuse. For instance, every year, the governments of Australia and New Zealand run an event called GovHack, where over 1,000 people get together over a weekend to collaborate and create free and open source apps and tools. And each one of these tools is designed around an open data set, making that data more accessible and more useful to people. I'm in the UK, I should probably say data, shouldn't I? Sorry, not gonna go native. And then we have open government. Open government, and it enables citizens to have oversight of their elected officials. Groups such as the Sunlight Foundation they use a multidisciplinary approach to further the transparency and accountability of governments and the representatives who compose them. There's open access, which is the access to research and knowledge through open access journals and other methods. Access to these materials are being protected by scholars and librarians the world round. Some organizations, such as Internet Archive, make it their mission to improve access to the world's information. I mean, literally their mission. The Internet Archive is far more than the Wayback Machine, which is what most people know it for. But its mission, that from day one in 1996, has been universal access to all knowledge. It has millions and millions of books and videos and images and software and other forms of information. And it is constantly working to find new ways to make this information available to everyone all over the world. And the concept of openness has spread outside of just the real of information and into the real world. And for that we have, for instance, the Open Seeds movement. It is specifically modeled on free and open source software movement, and it guarantees that farmers can get, plant, and crossbreed seeds which are unencumbered by genetic patents. So we have won. As openness, as a concept, we have won. It has gained momentum and it has spread like a wildfire and keeps spreading every day. Back in 2011, Marc Andreessen wrote an article with this quote in it: "Software is eating the world." And oh my gosh, you hear this everywhere now. Software is eating the world. In this article, Andreessen describes how business has become very reliant upon software. And even hardware itself often is just simply a medium through which the software can operate. If a modern company wishes to succeed, says Andreessen, then it must embrace this new default of driving innovation through software. Well, that was in 2011, and in the years since then, we see this a lot. Nearly every major English news outlet, and I looked for a base, like the initial quote, but no, everybody has said this. They have run some sort of story with the derivative title, "And open source is eating software." It's really an unoriginal title, just ripping off from MARC, but there's really no denying how far we have come in the past 40 years since Stallman first created the GNU project. The media and the entire tech industry recognizes the advancements in and the predominance of free and open source software. And that predominance is really evident when you glance around, when you just stop and think about it. There are really strong closed source contenders for operating system out there. But there's really little sense in denying that Linux is often the default operating system for many purposes. It's in your servers, it's in your cars, it's in your toasters. You can find Linux in everything. But it's not just Linux. I may be using a Mac, but we all really know that it's BSD under the covers. Right? Free and open source operating systems form a foundation on which many of our tools are based. Proprietary programming languages do exist. I found it rather difficult to locate any, but they're out there. For instance, MATLAB is the one that keeps coming up over and over again, and that is used a lot. But when you think of the languages which you personally know, the ones that you use, the ones that you read about in Hacker News and TechCrunch and whatever it is you read in opensource.com, right? All of these are open source languages. Your Perls, your Rubys, Rust, R, Erlang, Scala, JavaScript and Java, right? These are all open source languages. And each one of them have enormous open source ecosystems around them. When Apple released Swift in 2014, it did so as a proprietary language. It only took it a year to change course and open source that language. And now thanks to that, Swift is gaining momentum. This is a programming language which originally was developed for mobile apps, for things for Mac OS. But now it's finding a very, very comfortable home on the server. And that server is running Linux. The anecdata shows that proprietary languages really don't succeed in our current programming and technical environment. According to the trends on builtwith.com, 52% of websites, 52, are running on WordPress alone. It's spectacular. It's amazing. This little piece of software that Mullenweg put together back in 2003 just so he could blog a little more easily now runs 52% of the web. And that's not just blogs, it's storefronts, and it's webcomics, and homepages, and it's photo albums. It's everything, and they're all running on free software. And that's only one of the free and open source content management systems out there. You have Drupal and Joomla, and you put those together, and they're another 8% of the internet, of the World Wide Web. That's 60% right there, running on just 3 free and open source CMSs. If you add in things like Plone and Apache CQ and other open source alternatives, then you end up with a landslide win for open source and CMSs. So as with operating systems, there are strong proprietary contenders out there for databases. SQL Server and Oracle are the ones which jump to mind most quickly. But for many purposes, open source databases are the way to go. According to dbengines.com, which tracks such things, 6 of the top 10 databases in use today are free and open source: MySQL, Postgres, Mongo, Cassandra, SQLite, and Redis. Other members of the top 10 are Oracle, SQL Server, DB2, and believe it or not, Microsoft Access. I know, right? But Oracle is just barely in the top spot just barely in front of MySQL. So if you're in a tech company these days, odds are pretty good you're not going to be picking up the phone and calling Oracle and asking for a subscription. You will go to MySQL, you will go to Postgres, you'll go to Mongo, you'll go anywhere else, because we default typically now to free and open source solutions for our databases. In 2001, Kerala, India became the very first government to declare it was switching to free and open software solutions. 2001, only 3 years after the open source definition came out, and a government has decided this is the way to go. Since then, governments like Australia and Malaysia and Brazil and others, they've implemented or started programs to switch to using at least some free and open source software. The UK government's Technology Code of Practice, which is a really interesting read, if you like that sort of thing, as I do, it decrees that free and open source solutions must be considered. Not should, must. And that open standards must be used in development. And that all new code must be open by default, so it is available for use both inside and outside the government. Open. But the most pleasant surprise, at least for me, has been Microsoft embracing open source. There are those who are still very biased against Microsoft. And it's understandable considering the history this particular company has had with free and open source. And yes, it absolutely has a long way to go to be considered an open source company. But the changes that it has made over the past few years are real, and they're sincere. I absolutely love seeing how Microsoft has been evolving over these years and how it has changed and embraced these philosophies. I can't wait to see how it is going to continue evolving and how it will contribute to free and open in this future. If it works for them, of all companies, then free and open can work for everyone, and that is incredibly inspiring. So this is what winning looks like. We have won. Absolutely. We have gained momentum, we've gained mind share, we've done it, open source has truly arrived, we have won, this is what winning looks like. Congratulations everyone, great works. We have shipped FLOSS version 3.0. Free and open source has evolved out of this niche and mission-driven movement to become the foundation of software development and technology as we know it. We have shipped version 3.0. It includes all of the features which I just listed. Those were your release notes. But that's not really all it includes. Version 3.0 is the free and open source where we see a dramatic increase in corporate involvement in free and open source. This is from last year's GitHub conference where it showed the number of contributors, the largest contributors to all repositories on GitHub. Microsoft is at the top. Facebook, Docker, Angular, Google, Atom, Fort Awesome. I don't even know what Fort Awesome is, but I loved it. All of these, until you get down to Apache, Elastic, and NPM, and even Elastic and NPM, are companies. They're businesses, and they are the largest contributors to free and open source. Version 3.0 is also where we see an increase in corporate sponsorship of projects and of conferences. We're also seeing a large uptick in corporate membership and free and open source foundations. We also see an uptick in the number of foundations, relatedly. And corporations are open sourcing more internal projects. Some of these are really huge things, like these, Swift, Visual Studio, and Netflix's Chaos Monkey. Right? But a lot of them are really small, useful things as well. But there's an ever-increasing number of them coming from large companies. Now, overall, these are really great. I'm super happy. I love watching these things happen. It's amazing. It's inspiring. Part of the benefit of version 3.0 of free and open source is broader and increased support and adoption for free and open source. And these things show that is happening. But there are still a lot of companies out there that don't really get it. They don't understand. They're participating, but they're just kind of going through the motions without really understanding what it's all about. This can lead to a lot of problems for the greater free and open source software community. For instance, you get thirsty when you talk so much. For instance, open source. The source is available, it's out there, but it's not under an OSI approved license. Again, OSI is the Open Source Initiative. One of the roles that OSI performs, aside from maintaining the open source definition, is it reviews every software license out there which claims to be open, and it confirms that it adheres to the open source definition. The only software which can qualify as free and open source is that which uses an OSI approved license. Proprietary company project implementation specific licenses do not qualify usually as open source. They don't provide the 4 freedoms, or they are otherwise limiting. Another problem is companies just throwing a tarball over the wall. They call it open source because, hey, the source is available. Look, you can go see it. Isn't that great? But essentially what they have done is they've thrown that software on a trash heap. The company provides no support, no participation, no collaboration. All they do is hand the code over, put it on a repo somewhere, turn around and walk away. And that's not open source, because open source is about collaboration. Often companies will use a project, but they don't know that to be a good citizen they must contribute back in some way. OMG, this is free, how cool is that? But they don't realize that part of that freedom comes with participation. So of course, this has always been a bit of a problem in free and open source software, right? Some people call it freeloading. I don't like that. It's a very judgmental and negative term. And it implies that people know what they're doing. And often they don't understand. They don't know that they're doing something wrong. We need contributors to open source, but we also do need users. So it's okay if somebody is using and not contributing back, because these users provide feedback. They provide legitimacy to a project, because if nobody's using it, then it might not be something that's needed. But in general, using but not contributing can be okay. But there's a point at which you're simply taking advantage of the community, intentionally or not. And that last bit is important. Usually these problems are not malicious. They're not. They're not intentional. Sometimes companies don't participate, they don't contribute just because they're lazy, but lazy doesn't equate to malice, it's just lazy. I've been in this industry for 20 years now. I've been working with, around, or studying free and open source software for even longer than that. In my experience, it is very rare for companies to be malicious. Old school Microsoft was malicious. Current Microsoft is not. It's rare for them to be malicious when they engage in these worst practices for open source, which I've just listed. Usually, almost always, it's due to ignorance. Businesses know how to business in the way they're used to businessing, and this is known territory for them. They know how to do this. They understand the rules. Usually they're really good at this sort of stuff, of businessing the way we always business. We know how to do that. But they don't know how to do open source. It's completely foreign to them. Corporations are in uncharted waters. In business speak, entering an area in which you've never entered, that you're not familiar with yet, that's known as an emerging market. And free and open source is an emerging market for most companies. They don't speak the language. They don't understand those customers' needs. They don't understand the culture. And so they enter into free and open source and they flounder. Now, I could go into this a great deal, and I already have, so I encourage you to go have a look and read this article about cultivating the business of open source. So here's where all of us come in, everyone in this room. If we want to continue to grow the number of people participating in free and open source software, if we wish to grow the number of people who understand the fundamental philosophies of free and open source, and therefore the number of people who believe in free and open source, then we must help businesses and corporations and governments understand what these things are. We have to take the initiative and help them learn. They are here. They are involved in free and open source software. There is no going back. There's only going forward. So let's help them to do it properly, since they will be doing it anyway. Some people, when I mention this, get really worked up, and they say, no, this is against free and open source software. Corporate involvement and sellouts, that's terrible, death to capitalism. Let's make it end. Get them out of there. But the companies are here already, and they are not leaving, whether you like it or not. You can't ask companies to support projects on which they rely and then turn on them when they actually do so. You can't ask companies to sponsor and then cry sellouts when somebody takes the money. You can't ask for a livable wage for free and open source software maintainers and then get angry when that money comes from corporations. Now, unfortunately, I have heard people expressing each one of those objections, and very vehemently so. Their beliefs, and they are very welcome to them, but I have my own as well, and that is, you know, it's a lot easier than tilting that windmill of abolishing capitalism. It's infiltrating it, and it's working to shift it more towards your mindset. You're going to be more successful. So this, again, is where we come in, each and every one of us. So what did I mean by that? Well, I said that free and open source is an unknown country for businesses. And if it's a country, then I now hereby nominate each and every one of you as an ambassador from our country. If you see countries doing something wrong, and if we don't assume malice, which we probably shouldn't do because it typically is not that, then we must assume ignorance. And the beautiful thing about ignorance is it's fixable. Dunning-Kruger is that type of ignorance where you just don't even know what you don't know, and you think you know it, but you really don't. That's where companies are often with free and open source software, and each one of us can help with that. So there are two sides to this relationship. There's the company's side and there's our side. So we should step up. We should do our part on this side of the relationship. We can tackle the emerging market problem from our side. We don't have to wait for them. So help guide and teach corporations. Teach them what it means to be a good free and open source citizen, what free and open source actually means, and do it hopefully in a non-judgmental way. In order to do this, you will probably need to meet companies halfway, if not more. I was waiting for the cannons. So in order to do that, in order to meet companies halfway or more, you need to learn how best to communicate with them. Because they don't know necessarily they should be learning how to communicate with you. So learn their language, learn the business's culture, learn their needs. If you want to further the philosophy and the ideology of free and open source, you must help businesses because, again, they're not leaving. So help them cooperate and don't wait for them to reach out to you. Take the initiative and help when and where you can. So if you're participating in a free and open source project, if you're a member of an open source community, you hear companies using that, then just take a minute, fire off an email, reach out, see how they're using it. See how you can help them do better. They will really appreciate it. Believe me, I've worked with enough businesses. They really like it when somebody helps them do this properly because while they're there and they're not leaving, a lot of them are really scared and they don't know what they're doing. So it may feel like a lot of work for each of us to be doing this. It does. But we don't have to do a lot. Even just a little bit, even just one email, even just one pull request, which you review and nudge a company in a more free and open direction, helps. Every little bit helps. And then we get these huge, massive benefits for free and open source software. We spread our philosophy. We continue spreading it. And as we spread our philosophy, we spread the understanding and importance of supporting the free and open source software, which is supporting each and every one of us. We open up far more opportunities around the globe because a lot of these corporations are global. And much of free and open source software is in English. We can open up more opportunities for more people across the globe if we are helping these companies be successful. We gain more contributors, therefore, which is brilliant. We love that because if you gain more contributors, then you get more evolution on your project. And then you also get more support from the companies, from the people who otherwise wouldn't be able to contribute. Now you've opened the door and they can do that. And we evolve so many more minds towards openness. And isn't that really what we want? It's not the source, it's the openness. Now, these slides are already available. They are on Internet Archive. One of them, there are two sets of slides on there. One set has all the speaker notes, which I pretty much just read to you. So everything I just said and all the URLs are there. That is what I have for you, but I would like to take questions if anyone has some. Yes, sir. What's your name?
Alan Williams.
Hello, Alan Williams, or A. Williams, as your tag says.
One open, which you only briefly mentioned, which I think is actually probably more important.
I'm sorry, is this a question or a comment?
It's a comment.
I don't take comments.
Okay.
We can talk about stuff later.
Well, I was simply going to mention
I'm sorry, we have to move on. We can move on. I do not take comments. Usually I have a slide up here that says, you know, questions, not comments. I apologize for not entering that. That was not fair of me to not have given you, set up that expectation. I apologize. Yes, sir, what's your name?
Is it a question I can ask why you don't take comments?
Why I don't take comments is outside the scope of this particular topic, but I can talk to you about that later. This is not a dialogue. If you want to take comments, then you can be up front here, right? That's how these things go. I'm sorry, I do a lot of public speaking, and I learn, particularly as a woman, if you accept comments, then you get steamrolled by audience members, and I don't deal with that shit, to be honest. But if anyone has any questions, I would love to take them. Yes, sir. What's your name, sir?
Mike Fowler.
Hi, Mike.
Have you had much work with helping companies with their intellectual property clauses? Because I've been in organizations where effectively I'm held back from contributing because of clauses where effectively anything you produce while on even outside of company time, they have first dibs on that intellectual right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big barrier because you're worried about making a contribution and violating your own contract effectively. Have you had much dealings with that sort of thing?
So intellectual property is a question and how you handle it. Often companies do have statements in your contract about anything you create either on the job or even outside of the job belongs to them. Now this is something you can handle up front before you sign your contract. And the way to do that is you lawyer up. And you take your contract to an IP lawyer or a contract law person and say, hey, can you give me some different wording for this? And that contract can be negotiated. You can say, hey, I participate in free and open source software. Let's talk about this. And being very open about it up front is going to save you a lot of trouble later on. But a lot of companies now have open source review board type things where you can say, hey, I want to submit this patch to this project, and they will review them regardless of your contract. So you can go through that. But in general, IP is really complicated. And when somebody starts asking me IP questions, for instance, clients I help companies develop open source strategies and tactics and how they can release things. I immediately go stampeding to a lawyer because that stuff, if you screw it up, you're screwed, right? They're professionals who know how to do that, and I will always go to them. Yes, sir, what's your name?
Julien.
Hello, Julien.
Do you see that's a problem that FLOSS 3.0 relies a lot on GitHub, which is not FLOSS?
Do I see it as a problem that a lot of free and open source relies on GitHub, which is not free and open source? That is a religious question, frankly. The thing is, you have to go where the people are. If you want people to participate, you go where the people are. And that right now is GitHub. Now, you could go to GitLab. That is also an option. You can do that. Most of my repos, including the one with these slides, are on GitLab. But if I want to participate, if I'm working with a client and they are releasing something as free and open source, they need that community. And in order to build community, you go where the people are. You don't get arrogant and assume they're going to come to you. So you have to go right now to GitHub. Is that a problem? That's a personal question, right? I think each person has to make their own decision on that. More questions? Yes, sir. You are Craig.
Yes.
Okay.
You've got good eyesight. This is slightly off to the side, but it's probably worth asking. The European Parliament published some stuff in the last week or so talking about the right of robots to be treated as artificial people in the same way a company is treated as an artificial person in law. And I'm wondering, and you may not have thought about this, but what impact would that have on free and open source communities?
Oh, that's...
In terms of ownership of IP?
So the question is that the European Parliament has started discussing, I'd imagine, now robots as artificial people, like corporations are artificial people. Now, what impact that will have on free and open source is a fascinating question that I have not considered, but that's a good one. I will have to ponder that a bit. Maybe on one of the many flights I have between now and the time I finally get home. But that's a very good question, thank you. Would you, if you've thought about that at all, I would love it if we could publish that. To be honest, that's the sort of thinking I would love to get in opensource.com, because that's the stuff that we all should be considering. Where is our future going with free and open source? Is it, we've got robots and we've got cars, and now we've got self-driving cars, and maybe we'll have self-driving robot cars, and OMG, what's gonna happen there with free and open source? We should be thinking ahead in this way. And that's a great question, thank you. Yes, behind you and then you, sir. What's your name, sir?
It's Tim.
Hi, Tim.
I'd like to hear your thoughts about VMware/Dell and their unique way of using the Libre source.
VMware v. Dell and their unique way of doing that. I'm going to leave that to my friends at Software Freedom Conservancy. They've written a lot about that, so I recommend you go read their stuff. I try to stay out of legal matters as much as possible. Aside from making sure, if you're using GPL, please, you should be, or any OSI approved license, of which all the GPLs are, then, if it's a license and you've used it, you should obey it, because otherwise, why do we have a fucking license, right? So you should be compliant with your license, is my bottom line on all things. And the specifics of that case, I will leave to SFC. And you, sir, you had a question. What was your name?
Andrew.
Hi, Andrew.
You mentioned cars, which raises another whole interesting collection of questions to do with machine learning. I was reading an article yesterday suggesting that to make self-driving cars, they're going to have to be deep learning machines, and they will share their learning with each other. Now, what about the IP aspects of that?
The IP aspects of essentially code written by cars and by other machine learning institutions.
Machine generation of IP. How's that going to fit in? It ought to be open source, surely.
Well, it depends. I mean, if it's written by a proprietary system, it could be it ends up licensed under a proprietary license. But the people who create these things, get to define that. While the machines themselves are creating the code, there is also this fundamental aspect where we get to say under which rights that code is distributed. And distribution can mean across a network, depending upon your license. So you can define up front, I'd imagine it's going to be like anything else, right? They're going to have their own internal repos. There's no reason that repo can't have a license file. So how they do that, I don't know how that's going to work out, but I'm sure somebody is already thinking of it. They're just not writing articles because I haven't seen any. This is part of what I do all day, is just read articles and policy and processes and the like. And nobody's writing about that one, but it's good. I'll ask some of my IP lawyer friends, and I'm sure they've got some stuff on that. One more question, and then I'll let everybody go get coffee or tea or your beverage of choice. Yes, sir. Hello, Alan.
Any comments on the activities of Disney and McCarthy, who are trying to extend copyright ad infinitum for their films and music and stuff like that?
So copyright extensions is the question, essentially. Now, this is, again, a personal question and a legal question. I won't discuss the legal side of it because I am not a lawyer. Personally, I don't agree with it. I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. It will continue being extended and extended and extended, particularly in the United States, where our copyright in some cases goes for 75, 80, 100 years or something like that, beyond the death of the creator. And I think it undermines innovation in a way which we just can't afford as a civilization, and that it is something that should stop. But that's my personal view. I have no legal view at all, because I am not a lawyer. So thank you everyone for being here. You can have a look at the slides if you wish, and I should be around most of today and half of tomorrow.